It's great to be with everyone here tonight to talk about the Protect Ontario by Cutting Red Tape Act 2025. Now, Madam Speaker, despite the flashy title, which suggests that this bill might be doing something to make life easier for the people of Ontario, I think the reality is, at least in parts of the bill, it tells a very different story. Now, for tonight's proceedings, I'm going to limit my remarks to Schedule 5, because I think Schedule 5 actually works to weaken, not strengthen, consumer protections in our province. Schedule 5 proposes changes to the Consumer Protection Act of 2002, specifically around the rules governing loyalty points for reward programs. I think many Ontarians participate in reward programs. It might be with their credit card, it might be optimum points at Shoppers Drug Mart and Loblaws, it might be points at Petro-Canada or one of the other gas stations, but I think a lot of us, if we were to open up our wallets or our purses, probably have a couple reward cards in there, maybe a couple dozen reward cards in there, depending on how voracious of a saver and a spender you might be. So loyalty reward programs play a pretty big part in our lives. They are in very important programs that nearly every Ontarian engages with. As I said, whether that's at the grocery store, the gas station, at the local pharmacy, or online. For many families across Ontario, the points that they accumulate actually help stretch their already tight household budgets. Something that matters now more than ever as we see the cost of living continue to go up. People redeem their points to cover a portion of their grocery bill or a portion of their bill at the pharmacy. It might be to help buy school supplies for their kids, or it might even be to help purchase holiday or Christmas gifts, Madam Speaker. So these programs are vital and play an important role in the lives of Ontario families. And that's why the protections that we currently offer consumers as it relates to those points are so very important. Right now, the law in Ontario, as I understand it, clearly states that reward points cannot expire due to the passage of time. That means if you earn a reward point, you don't lose it simply because you haven't used it for a period of time. You know, some of these reward programs are more lucrative than others. Some of them, in order to accumulate enough points to buy something of meaning or to get good consumer value back from, you need to save them up over a period of time to get to that magic number. And so the thought of losing those points because you haven't used them is challenging. And that's why the previous government actually brought in that regulation, or that law, it's not a regulation, excuse me, that legislation to say that your reward points cannot expire simply because it's been a while. In fact, I would argue, Madam Speaker, that if the passage of time allows for you to lose your reward points, if you lose your points simply because you haven't used them, that's almost like a tax. So basically the government is proposing to increase taxes on consumers by having them lose their reward points if they haven't used them over a period of time. So this, considering how many reward points we all might have, this could be one of the biggest tax increases in Ontario history, Madam Speaker. Like, I know currently I'm sitting on something like 350,000 optimum points, which I've been accumulating over the course of 3, 4, 5 years with my wife. And, you know, that's like $350 or $400 at Shoppers Drug Mart. That's a pretty big tax increase from this government if all of a sudden I were to lose those points. So I think it's important for us to protect the value of those points and to protect consumers, if only so the government can maintain the false premise that they've never raised taxes, which we all know that is not true, but we want to allow them at least the optics of being able to protect that particular message. You know, Madam Speaker, if a company wants to change its loyalty program or restructure it, that's one thing, and certainly we see that happen. Air Canada is about to change the airplane structure, as we know. But those companies shouldn't be able to simply wipe out the value that you've accumulated in your points program simply because the calendar has flipped the next page. Madam Speaker, the law that was achieved and introduced by the previous government was a hard-fought victory for consumers. And we can thank Bill 47, the Protecting Rewards Points Act, which was a consumer protection amendment, for this protection. It was Bill 47 was put forward by former Liberal member of Provincial Parliament, Arthur Potts, in 2016. And it passed unanimously. Can you imagine, Madam Speaker, some very insightful Conservatives who were in the opposition benches at the time understood that if we allowed reward points to go away with time, that was actually a tax on consumers. And those Conservatives, the Conservatives of 2016, were true to the mantra of not wanting to raise taxes on consumers. If only they could see a mere 9 years into the future and the high tax Tories that the Premier currently leads in the legislature, Madam Speaker. So, and I might just point out that unanimous consent and royal assent was achieved 2 months later at the end of 2016, just in time for the holidays. So Conservative 9 years ago understood that protecting consumers right before the holidays, right before Christmas, was a gift. It was, hey, look at what we're helping you achieve for Christmas, a Christmas miracle, as my friend over on the far side mentioned. And this Christmas, Madam Speaker, instead of getting Santa Claus coming down the chimney, the Grinch is showing up, but he's trying to walk right through the front door. So, let me just read the section of that previous legislation, the Christmas miracle, as it were, Madam Speaker. Subject to the other provisions of this section, no supplier shall enter into or amend a consumer agreement under which rewards points are provided to provide for the expiry of reward points due to the passage of time alone, i.e., your points are protected. Now, imagine, Madam Speaker, if a bank came to us and said, look, you haven't spent any money in your savings account recently. You're saving money, but you haven't spent any money in your savings account. We're just going to close your account and take all the money. What do you think the people of Ontario would say if that were to come to be? I think there would be a revolt, Madam Speaker. And people of Ontario would be right to revolt under that circumstance. Allowing a company to say, you've been diligent at saving your points. You've been so diligent you haven't actually used them yet. But you know what? It's been too long. Sayonara. There you go. Again, I think that would be amongst the biggest tax increases Ontarians have ever seen. Now, Madam Speaker, in 2016, Ontarians witnessed exactly what happens when companies are allowed to make their reward points expire. Air Miles attempted to wipe out millions of dollars worth of points unless consumers redeemed them by a rushed artificial deadline. People were furious, not just because they felt entitled to something for free, but because they had already earned those points. They had purchased groceries, they had purchased gas, different household items to help them accumulate those points over time. They played by the rules, and consumers expected companies to do the same. After massive, absolutely massive, enormous public backlash and legal pressure, the company did reverse their decision. And then Ontario Liberals stepped up to the plate like the good consumer protection advocates we are, and introduced the legislation to ensure that points would never expire due to the passage of time. When confronted with a blatant attack on consumer protection, it was on the Ontario Liberal government under previous leadership that quickly responded by passing strong consumer protection legislation in Bill 47. At the time, Liberals made it clear that the expiry of reward points was not acceptable and would not be permitted. And we created this legislation for the first time so that Ontarians could trust that the rewards that they earned would be there tomorrow. Unfortunately, Madam Speaker, Schedule 5 in this bill wipes that off the map, takes it away. It would allow Shoppers Drug Mart, Air Miles, Esso, Petro-Canada, whoever, whatever loyalty program, you name it, to say, you know what, Blay, you haven't spent your points quickly enough. Too bad, so sad. It's too expensive for us to maintain the program, or whatever their reason. We want to take that liability off the books, wiping out that balance. Just like the other analogy, Madam Speaker, it would be like a bank saying you haven't spent the money in your savings account quickly enough, and so we're going to take it back from you. Thank you very much. Sorry to see you go. I don't think that is the kind of consumer protections Ontarians expect or want from their government. So, Madam Speaker, there was an opportunity to strengthen this provision, to strengthen the value that rewards programs do provide to Ontarians, to ensure that Ontarians benefit from the programs that they sign up for in good faith and participate in good faith. But the government is choosing to go completely the opposite direction. Rather than strengthen the protection, the government is, in fairness, they're getting rid of it altogether. So with Bill 46, what was once a straightforward rule in legislation, it was the law, may now become an uncertain regulatory framework to be decided at the whim of the government, basically whenever something comes about. That something could be a phone call to the Premier's 24/7 1-800 number that he gives out. It could be an encounter at a social event, which may or may not have had a price tag of a certain value tapped onto it. It may have been, the chat on the dance floor at a wedding reception. Who knows how these ideas come into the mind of certain members of the government, Madam Speaker? And it's not for me to say what may or may not influence those decisions, but it becomes a decision of the Cabinet as opposed to the law of the land. So, Madam Speaker, consumer protection should be on our minds every single day. We should never be intentionally creating loopholes to weaken consumer protections in our province. So this is not red tape reduction. This is not modernization. This is a step backward for consumer rights. Now, the government argues that this change creates a sense of flexibility, but consumers need predictability when it comes to counting on their loyalty programs and their reward points. They want to know that when they spend money and accumulate points, those points are theirs, that they are not a temporary status symbol that can disappear whenever the company decides to wave its magic wand and start over. And this, again, Madam Speaker, this uncertainty that the government is about to bring to the marketplace comes at the worst possible time. Families are struggling with the rising cost of food. They're struggling with high interest rates. They're struggling with more expensive housing, more expensive mortgage payments, more expensive rents. Many more people are relying on loyalty points to help offset some of these pressures. When you go to Loblaws and you buy groceries for your family, you can use your accumulated reward points to take part of the price off, or in some cases, pay the entire bill. You can do it to offset the cost it is to put gas in your tank so you can drive to and from work, because the generational transit project that the government still hasn't able to get off the ground and is taking longer than it took to build the St. Lawrence Seaway isn't helping you commute to work or back, Madam Speaker. So you have to ask yourself, why in the middle of an affordability crisis would the government decide that this was the best way forward? That big corporations, why they would give big corporations more power to devalue the rewards that they're offering to their customers, while at the same time offering very few actual consumer protections to Ontario families. If the goal of Bill 46 is truly to reduce red tape, then the government should strengthen, not weaken, the clear protections that are already in place. Don't allow a company to change the value of points to make my 300,000 points worth less. They should maintain their value. Keep the rules simple. Points are earned by consumers. They can't expire because of time. And they should maintain the value that they earned at the time of the earning. So there's no deflation of the value of the points. There's no inflation of the value of the points. The value of the points is the value of the points. That should be the rule. That's a rule that works. It's fair and it protects consumers. That's a rule that people understand. And that's a rule that should remain in legislation, not be subject to the unpredictable whims of a government who likes to go to fancy parties and speak to fancy people and charge admission to family weddings, Madam Speaker. So if the government seriously believes in protecting consumers, they should do so directly. They have an opportunity. They have an opportunity a month and a bit before Christmas to say, no, we're not going to let the value of your loyalty points go out the window. We're not going to allow Father Time to undo the value of those points. We are going to ensure that the points you earn today are the points you're going to have tomorrow, so you can use them to pay for Christmas dinner, so you can use them to buy your daughter or your son that extra gift under the tree. You can use them to put gas in your car so you can get to work and back in the cold winter months, Madam Speaker. That's what we should be doing to protect consumers, to ensure that they have a good Christmas. Unfortunately, Madam Speaker, as I said before, Mr. Grinch is walking through the door and is about to take all their points away, and that's how the government wants it. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Questions? I recognize the member from Markham Thornhill.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, member from Olean, for your remarks. And Speaker, while our government is modernizing the services so people can apply online instead of waiting in line, the opposition seems to determined to keep Ontarians stuck in the past. They call modernization is reckless. But what reckless about saving taxpayers' time and money? What is reckless about putting government service via people actually online, not in line? These upgrades mean less time wasted for the residents of Ontario, fewer headache, and more convenient for families, workers, and businesses owners to thrive in Ontario. My question to the member: why does the opposition prefer delays, duplication, and paper forms over the digital delivery? Do they really think people should have to take a day off to work just to get the permit stamped? Or they're simply more comfortable defending outdated system than embracing the progress? Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The member for Orleans.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. What I'm trying to do is to protect Ontario consumers from spending 8 hours on a 1-800 number wondering why all their loyalty points have gone away. I'm trying to stop them from wasting a day of work on the phone with Shoppers Drug Mart wondering why their 300,000 points have gone away simply because they haven't used them in time for whoever's likings. So by protecting consumers, by ensuring the value that they've earned is that the value that they can maintain and the value they can then spend, I think is at the heart of what consumer protection is about. That's what I believe. I'm not sure why they believe that eroding savings and taking valuable hard-earned points away from everyday Ontarians is the path forward, or even can be considered cutting red tape. It's cutting something. It's not red tape, Madam Speaker. I think we should be protecting the value those consumers have earned.
Question. I recognize the member from Hamilton West, Ancaster Dundas.
Thank you very much, and I want to thank the member for pointing out yet again in this bill another instance where it purports to be protecting Ontarians, but in fact, if you go through every schedule, who does it protect? It primarily protects business interests. You know, your colleague, the member from Ottawa South, has been reminding us time and time again today that Schedule 9 of this bill has the government taking sides with a huge corporation, I Am Gold, over an 88-year-old widow. And now what you're showing us here is that the government is more concerned about taking a liability off the books of huge corporations like Shoppers Drug Mart than they are protecting the net worth, if you will, of individual citizens. I mean, I have a family member who saved points for years, just so that he could then pass them to our family members so that we could afford trips to go visit one another. This family member would be rolling over in his grave if he knew after years and years of saving those points they were going to be taken away like that from this government. So can you just, highlight why this bill has got nothing to do with protecting Ontarians? It's all about protecting business interests and their friends and business interests.
The member from Orleans.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Now, I remember when my wife and I bought our house we moved in the summer of 2005. And like a lot of young couples, getting a house was a stretch. We were stretched every 2 weeks on payday, or the day before payday, I should say, to buy groceries, to put gas in the tank, to get those things that we thought a middle-class family should be working towards. And I know that Christmas was particularly difficult because we had put a big down payment down. So we had used a lot of our savings for the down payment. And we were young professionals, we were making our way, but money was tight. And we used air miles to buy each other gifts that Christmas. And we used I think it was petrol points to buy gifts for our fathers that Christmas. And that was an asset that we had accumulated through our everyday spending. And that's an asset, unfortunately, that this government wants to erode.
Response?
Simply because the calendar has switched from one month to the next.
Question? Recognize the member from Beaches, East York.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and thank you very much to the member for Orleans for delving deeply into this bill to discover this schedule and what it's going to do. And I represent a riding, as you know, beautiful Beaches, East York, which was held previously by the former member that my colleague mentioned, Arthur Potts. And I'll tell you, to this day, he is still railing on and bragging because he's so proud of that bill, Protecting Rewards Points Act, that he passed in 2016. And unanimously, yes, thank you for the reminder, as an early Christmas gift. What do you think? My question to you, to my colleague, what do you think? So the Conservative members at the time got it, and they voted unanimously. What is wrong with these Conservatives? What's going through their heads that they don't get this?
The member for Orleans.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Well, I think there might be one or two of those Conservatives in the House with us tonight, Madam Speaker, so they might want to stand up and explain to the House what's changed in the last 9 years, or better yet, they're going to need to explain to their constituents right after Christmas what's changed and why they think the reward points should be able to go out the window simply because you haven't used them fast enough. I think what common sense Conservatives used to understand is that if you earn something, the value of that thing that you've earned should maintain itself over time. Time should not be the reason that the value erodes. You shouldn't be allowed to erode the money out of your bank account because of time. You shouldn't be allowed to erode the value of your reward points because of time. Unfortunately, the current regime, who are quickly earning the nickname high tax Tories, are in favor of this massive tax on consumers that will only benefit certain larger private sector corporations. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Question? I recognize the member from Nickel Belt.
Thank you, Speaker, and I appreciate the comments that have been made by the member. Really, at first reading of the bill, I had not realized some of the changes that the government is putting forward that basically would allow points, as you described very well, that have been accumulated that people count on to to more or less disappear, not something that I would support. I was interested to know with the member support and think that it would be important to have this bill go into committee after second reading so that the people of Ontario have an opportunity to have their say on the 22 schedule that go all over the map, from forestry to gaming to children to courts and everything else in between.
The member for Orleans.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Well, I think that's the point, right? You have an omnibus piece of legislation with nearly 24 schedules, some of which are, I think, for most people, really difficult to get behind publicly. I even think for those guys, going home at Christmas and saying your reward points are going out the window because you haven't spent them fast enough is going to be a really tough sell. But like good magicians, they're trying to distract from what's going on in the background over here with the pretty girl in the bikini over on the left-hand side, or the elephant dancing on a ball, or whatever the distraction is, right? That Magicians movie is actually in the theater this weekend. It was number 2 at the box office. I think if they could only learn from the Ford government, they would have made it number 1 in the box office, Madam Speaker. They're hoping that Ontarians don't hear about this. They're hoping that they get distracted by the forestry measures or the measures about this or the measures about that, and so they don't learn that their hard-earned loyalty points in gas and grocery stores, at pharmacies, and everywhere else you earn loyalty points are potentially going out the window. The Grinch is about to steal Christmas, and his name is Doug Ford. Thank you, Madam Speaker.